of Mars, where the air was thin and hope thinner still, Kalen stood apart, not by height or build, though he possessed the lean, wired frame of a born fighter, but by the sheer force of his presence. He moved through the rebel camps, nestled in forgotten mining tunnels and sun-bleached craters like a fire in the gray landscape, igniting something dormant in the weary eyes of those who followed him. They called him the Martian, a moniker earned not just from his birthplace, but from the way he seemed forged from the planet itself, resilient, unforgiving to its enemies, and harboring a fierce, hidden core. His voice, raspy from the dry air and countless shouted orders, could cut through the din of a training ground or soothe the anxieties of a desperate populace with equal effect. He possessed a natural magnetism that drew the downtrodden and the defiant alike to his banner. Kalen's justice was a simple, brutal code etched into his very being. The strong do not prey upon the weak. He had seen the corporations bleed Mars dry, seen the Earth Alliance troops enforce their will with casual cruelty, and the images were burned into his memory like solar flares. This wasn't just a political struggle for him. It was a visceral, personal crusade against the boot on the throat of his people. His hatred for the oppressors wasn't a cold, calculated thing, but a burning inferno that fueled his every action. It was in the hard line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of freedom, the readiness with which he drew his weapon. He hated the indifference of those who profited from Martian suffering, the arrogance of the off-worlders who treated their planet as little more than a resource depot. This righteous fury made him a formidable leader. He didn't ask his rebels to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Often standing at the front of the charge, his energy infectious. He remembered names, listened to grievances, and shared their meager rations, building a loyalty that went deeper than rank or fear. They believed in him because he so clearly believed in the cause. He spoke not of abstract political ideals, but of tangible liberation, enough food to eat, clean water to drink, the right to walk their own dust without permission. These were the simple, fundamental rights denied them by the ruling powers, and Kalen articulated the yearning for them with a raw passion that resonated in every corner of the rebellion. The weight of their hopes rested heavily on his shoulders, a burden he accepted without complaint. He understood that for many, he was the only symbol of defiance they had, a flickering light against the overwhelming darkness. He carried that responsibility into every skirmish, every clandestine meeting, every moment he drew breath on the Red Planet. His charisma wasn't performative. It was an outflowing of his genuine conviction. When he rallied the troops before a dangerous mission, his words weren't just orders, but a shared promise of a better future, a vow to make the oppressors pay for every injustice. It was a powerful, almost spiritual connection he forged with his fighters. This deep-seated sense of justice was the bedrock of his leadership, the moral compass that, for now, guided his every decision. He fought not for glory or power, but for the inherent right of Martians to determine their own destiny. He envisioned a Mars free from external tyranny, a place where its inhabitants could finally breathe without the weight of oppression crushing their spirits. And so, Kalen, the Martian, stood ready, a charismatic beacon of rebellion, fueled by a burning hatred for injustice and a fierce love for his planet. His path was set, leading his people into the brutal heart of the Civil War, a fight where his ideals would be tested against the harsh realities of survival and the seductive pull of power. Mars was not a world for the faint of heart. Its surface was a vast, rust-colored canvas of desolation, sculpted by ancient winds and marked by craters that swallowed horizons. The thin, toxic atmosphere offered little protection, forcing life, what little there was of it, to huddle beneath ferrocrete domes or deep within the planet's scarred crust. Every breath was filtered, every step a reminder of the hostile void just beyond the pressurized habitats. Survival here was a relentless, grinding struggle. Dust storms, thick as blood and abrasive as sandpaper, could scour paint off vehicles and choke unprotected life in minutes. The temperature swings were brutal, plunging from barely tolerable warmth in shielded enclaves to lethal cold in the exposed wastes. It was a world that demanded constant vigilance and offered no quarter. Sprawling mining colonies were scabbed across the Martian landscape, clinging to resource-rich veins like parasites. These were not cities of gleaming towers, but utilitarian complexes of corrugated metal, reinforced plasteel, and exhaust vents that belched filtered air into the thin sky. They were built on exploitation, extracting vital minerals and rare earth elements to fuel the war machines and economies of other planets. Life inside the colonies was monotonous and harsh. Miners, laborers, and their families toiled under crushing quotas, breathing recycled air and dreaming of a life elsewhere, a life that felt increasingly impossible. Overseers from the core worlds enforced draconian rules, their authority backed by automated sentries and the ever-present threat of orbital bombardment. Resentment festered in the recycled air. The inherent brutality of Martian existence, coupled with the oppressive control from off-world powers, had turned the planet into a fertile ground for dissent. Every grievance, every hardship, every lost life to a cave-in or a dust storm fueled the simmering anger. The promise of freedom, however distant, became a beacon in the endless red night. Rebel factions were not a unified force, but a mosaic of disparate groups, each with their own ideology, territory, and methods. Some were fiercely independent miners defending their claims, others were ideologically driven cells fighting for Martian autonomy, and many were simply desperate people pushed too far, seeking vengeance for injustices suffered. These groups carved out territories in the vast canyons, utilized abandoned research outposts, or hid in the labyrinthine tunnels of defunct mines. Communication was difficult, travel dangerous, and trust a commodity rarer than the minerals they fought over. Yet they shared a common enemy and a burning desire to break free from the yoke of planetary rulers who saw Mars only as a resource pit. The struggle was not just against external forces. Internal conflicts and power struggles were endemic among the rebels. Supplies were scarce, leadership was contested, and the constant threat of infiltration or betrayal hung heavy in the air. Survival often meant making alliances with unsavory characters or resorting to tactics that blurred the lines between freedom fighter and terrorist. Even the landscape seemed to conspire against them. Navigating the vast, featureless plains required expert knowledge or advanced technology, while the treacherous canyons hid both shelter and ambush points. Every journey, whether for supplies, intelligence, or a raid, was fraught with peril, a gamble against the environment as much as against their enemies. Mars, therefore, was less a planet and more a crucible, forging warriors in its unforgiving heat and dust, breeding defiance in the hearts of those who refused to be merely cogs in an interplanetary machine. It was a world defined by its harshness, its wealth, and the relentless, brutal spirit of rebellion that pulsed beneath its scarred red surface. The Martian dust devils swirled around Keelan's boots, the red grit clinging to his worn combat fatigues. Ahead, barely visible through the perpetual haze, stood Outpost 7, a squat, reinforced structure the Earth forces had dug into the rust-colored rock. This was their target tonight, a vital supply hub and communications relay for the occupation. Kalen scanned his team, faces grim under the low-light filters of their helmets. They were a mix of miners, laborers, and former military, hardened by years of oppression and the unforgiving Martian landscape. Justice had fueled their initial rebellion, a burning desire to reclaim their home from the off-worlders. But tonight, justice felt cold and hard, a blade honed by necessity and the bitter taste of past defeats. Kalen signaled the advance. They moved in a silent, practiced wedge formation, utilizing the terrain's natural depressions for cover. The wind howled, a constant mournful sound that helped mask their approach. Every rebel knew the stakes. Failure here meant more subjugation, more resources plundered, more lives lost to the callous machine of Earth's control. The perimeter sensors were the first hurdle. Anya's ghost tech smuggled and jury-rigged through a shimmering distortion field over their forms, allowing them to slip past the basic detection grid. A guard tower loomed, its searchlight sweeping the empty expanse. Kalen pointed, and a sniper, a woman named Val with eyes like chips of ice, took the shot. The light winked out silently. Breaching the main gate required brute force, but Kalen had planned for it. A shaped charge, carefully placed, blew a ragged hole through the reinforced plasteel. Alarms blared instantly, shattering the Martian quiet. There was no more stealth, only the raw, brutal charge into the breach. Earth soldiers poured into the corridor, standard-issue energy rifles spitting blue bolts. Kalen met them head on, his combat knife a blur in the closed confines. He didn't just fight, he killed with a focused, terrifying efficiency, each movement economical and deadly. A parry, a thrust, a quick slash across a throat, it was over before the soldier hit the ground. His voice, amplified through his helmet comms, cut through the din of combat. South wing clear. Val, cover the intersection. Marcus, with me. He wasn't just fighting, he was directing, his mind processing the chaos, identifying threats and opportunities simultaneously. His leadership was absolute, born not just of rank, but of raw, undeniable capability. The fighting was brutal, visceral. Energy bolts crisscrossed the narrow passages, slagging the metal walls. The air filled with the acrid smell of burnt flesh and ozone. Rebels and Earth soldiers fell, their last moments swallowed by the roar of combat. Kalen moved through it like a force of nature, leaving a trail of fallen enemies in his wake. They fought through the operations center, silencing the comms, then pushed towards the main power core. Kalen kicked open a door, engaging 3 soldiers instantly. His rifle barked, precise and unforgiving. 2 went down. The third raised his hands, fear plain on his face. Kalen didn't hesitate. A quick burst ended him. There was no time for prisoners, no room for mercy in this fight. Hours later, as the twin moons rose, painting the landscape in eerie silver light, the outpost was silent, save for the groans of the wounded and the crackling of dying fires. Kalen stood amidst the carnage, his uniform smeared, his face grim. They had taken the objective, secured the supplies, dealt a blow to the occupation. It was a victory, hard won and bloody, another testament to Kalen's ruthless effectiveness and the steep price of rebellion on the Red Planet. Deep within the labyrinthine tunnels carved beneath the rust-colored Martian plains, far from the brutal glare of the twin moons, Anya the Venusian bent over a workbench, humming with arcane energy. The air in her makeshift lab, a repurposed mining office, smelled faintly of ozone and hot solder. Unlike the dust-choked chaos of the surface raids, her world was one of precision, schematics, and the quiet hum of intricate machinery. He wasn't a fighter in the traditional sense. Not one to stand shoulder to shoulder with Kalen in the trenches, trading plasma fire with occupying forces. Her battlefield was the circuit board, her weapon the soldering iron, her armor the intricate web of wires and components she wove together with almost surgical skill. Hailing from the sweltering, technologically advanced cities of Venus, Anya possessed a mind uniquely suited to bending metal and energy to the rebels' will. Venusians were renowned for their engineering prowess, their cities floating amidst corrosive clouds, a testament to their mastery over hostile environments. Anya was an exceptional example, a prodigy who had turned her talents towards liberation rather than the Emperor's iron grip or the brutal pragmatism of the rising warlords. She had shed her Venusian identity, adopting the simple moniker Anya to blend in. Her true capabilities a closely guarded secret within the rebel cell. Her work was vital, often the unseen edge that gave Kalen's ragtag forces a fighting chance against better equipped, more numerous enemies. While others trained with standard issue rifles, Anya was fabricating prototype energy dampeners, designing compact shield generators, and, most importantly, crafting weapons that were both devastatingly effective and often bewilderingly unconventional. Just yesterday, Kalen had returned from the raid, his armor scorched and dented, a grim victory etched on his face. He hadn't spoken of the specifics, but the hushed whispers among the troops told of a new kind of explosive, one that had bypassed standard shielding and turned an enemy strongpoint into molten slag. That was Anya's signature, innovation born of desperation. Operating in secret was not just a preference, it was a necessity. Her defection from Venusian society, coupled with the sensitive nature of her inventions, made her a prime target for every faction in the brewing war. Should her identity or the scope of her work be discovered, it would not only endanger her, but compromise Kalen's entire operation. Her current project pulsed softly on the bench, a complex device of polished chrome and shimmering energy conduits. It wasn't a weapon of destruction this time, but something far more subtle, designed to disrupt enemy communications across vast distances, blinding their fleets and leaving them vulnerable. It was a high-risk, high-reward gambit. The pressure was immense. Every component had to be perfect, every calculation precise. A single failure could cost lives, not just her own, but those of the rebels who relied on her creations. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like the thick Venusian atmosphere she had escaped. Yet, amidst the grinding tension, there was a spark of defiant purpose in her eyes. She saw the war not just as a brutal struggle for power, but as a chance to build something new from the ashes. A future where brilliant minds like hers weren't shackled by oppressive regimes. Her engineering wasn't just about destruction, it was about enabling freedom. She was the quiet engine of Kalen's rebellion, the hidden forge where ingenuity met necessity. While Kalen commanded the visible front, Anya was the ghost in the machine, the brilliant, secretive Venusian who armed the rebellion with the tools to fight back against a galaxy tearing itself apart. The air in the makeshift command center, repurposed from a sand-blasted cargo bay, always tasted of stale, recycled oxygen and grit. Kalen wiped sweat from his brow, the metallic tang of blood still faint on his hands despite the scrub down. He turned from the tactical display, where flickering markers showed the costly success of their recent raid, and his gaze settled on Anya. She was hunched over a workbench, soldering iron spitting sparks, her brow furrowed in concentration. Anya, the Venusian, as some whispered, though she'd been on Mars longer than most, possessed a mind that saw past the immediate chaos of battle. While Kalen planned the brutal dance of close-quarters combat and calculated assault vectors, Anya designed the tools that made it possible. The modified blasters that punched through reinforced armor, the stealth tech that masked their movements, the life support systems that kept them breathing in the Martian dust. Their connection wasn't forged in fire and blood like his bond with the Raiders. It was built in the quiet hum of her workshop, over late-night discussions of strategy and purpose. Kalen admired her quiet intensity, the way her hands moved with practiced grace over complex machinery, bringing deadly efficiency to their cause. He walked over, careful not to disturb the delicate work. "Status report, Anya?" he asked, his voice rough but lacking the command edge he used with the others. With Anya, it was different. There was an unspoken understanding, a shared weight. She looked up, her eyes, framed by smudges of grease, met his with a directness that always disarmed him slightly. "The disruptor charges performed better than anticipated, Keelan. We breached the perimeter in under 2 minutes. Casualties were acceptable, given the objective." Her voice was calm, practical, but he saw the flicker of weariness there. "Acceptable," Keelan echoed, the word feeling like ash in his mouth. He knew the cost, felt it in the ache of his muscles and the faces of the fallen. "It's never acceptable, is it?" He leaned against the workbench, the cool metal a stark contrast to the recent heat of battle. Anya sighed, setting the soldering iron down. "No, it's not. But it's necessary. Every life lost buys freedom for countless others. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it?" She didn't sound entirely convinced, and Kalen knew she struggled more openly with the moral toll than he allowed himself to. "It's the truth," Kalen stated, trying to inject conviction into his tone. "They occupy our home, strip our resources, treat us like dirt. We fight because the alternative is slavery, for us and for generations to come. That's our common goal." His hand instinctively went to the worn grip of his sidearm. Anya picked up a small, intricate device, turning it over in her fingers. "And we fight for a future where such costs aren't measured in lives, where brilliant minds build, not destroy, where justice isn't a weapon, but a foundation." Her vision was always purer, more idealistic than his. Despite the differences in their approach, his the brutal immediacy of the warrior, hers the calculated innovation of the engineer, they were fundamentally aligned. They both saw the glaring injustice of the Emperor's lackeys bleeding Mars dry and crushing its people. They both believed, with a fierce, desperate hope, that a better future was possible, even if the path to it was paved with blood and sacrifice. This shared belief, this mutual respect for the part the other played in the struggle, was the bedrock of their alliance. Kalen relied on Anya's genius to arm his fighters. Anya relied on Kalen's leadership and courage to give her inventions purpose. In the desolate heart of the Martian rebellion, their bond was a crucial, fragile anchor against the encroaching storm. He looked at her again, really looked at her, seeing not just the engineer, but the woman who understood the quiet horror beneath the necessary violence. "We'll get there, Anya," Kalen said softly. a promise he made to her as much as to himself. Together. It was a vow sealed not with words, but with shared purpose and the grim determination etched onto both their faces.